My name is Eva Lerner-Lam, and I'm the eldest child of Sau-Wing and Jean L. Lam. My father was an amateur violinist. He had developed a little bit of skill in his college years in Shanghai, and my mom learned piano from a Russian piano teacher in Shanghai, and the two of them ended up getting along and finding that playing chamber music together was a source of comfort for them. And they practiced a lot, individually and together. It was just a way, I think, of relaxing and reminding themselves that life was worth living. We had very little money when we were growing up, but they somehow managed to get us piano lessons and violin lessons. And because music meant so much to them, and they knew that music would help their children grow up in America with some hope. Our parents really wanted us to have a balanced life. So we would definitely have to study the math and the science and make sure that we understood what really makes the world work. And then on the other side, sort of the right brain, left brain thing, the other side of our minds had to be culturally attuned. And we could then self-sustain and self-inspire ourselves despite any obstacles. So my father, he was basically a file clerk in a small import-export company in New York and had very, very little money. Eventually, the boss died. The parent company in Hong Kong said, well, let's get that clerk to fill in for the boss. The clerk did not too badly. And so he became a permanent boss of the New York office of this Hong Kong trading company. And one year he got a bonus of about $11,000. And what did he do with that bonus? He bought a Guadagnini violin, a 1757, which you could buy for about $10,000 and change back in those days, 1961, 62. There was no conception of violins being an investment back in the early 60s. Not at all. The violin was just something that you could seek some solace, some comfort from. The word got out that in this Veterans Administration tract home development in the middle of New Jersey, there was this Chinese guy with 4 kids and a wife who had a Guadagnini violin. So the word started getting around. The town that we lived in is about equidistant between Philadelphia and New York. So Philadelphia artists would come and New York artists would come to our house on weekends to play the JV Guadagnini violin, which my dad made freely available to anybody who wanted to make the trip and who would sit down and talk to him about the history of this particular violin and about the whole other world of violins. So he went from a monkey head scroll violin to a JV Guadagnini, and that was his door to this world of violin players, violin dealers, violin makers, researchers, students, teachers, conservatory deans. All of those kinds of people started visiting us on Friday evenings. If it would get late, they'd say, would it be okay if I sleep on the sofa? And so my mom would bring out some towels and some sheets. We didn't have extra bedrooms. We didn't have extra cots or anything. So people would just sleep on our living room floor because they wanted to be there in the morning to play some more chamber music with their instrument and with this JV Guadagnini. Violinists who would come and say, oh, I want to play that Guadagnini, they'd bring their own. And maybe it's an Amati, and maybe it's a Strad. And so suddenly, our little tract home development home in the middle of, literally the middle of New Jersey, became this place where it was like the center of the universe for a lot of these orchestral members. And in particular, great masters like Isaac Stern, Itzhak Perlman, they would send their students to, at first they would visit, they'd get to know Dad, they'd get to see that he really does have a JB Guadagnini, but, go back to Juilliard and, I've got a student, he should at least try what that JB Guadagnini feels like. Then it turns out the student and the teacher both come, and then there's first violinist of the Philadelphia Orchestra comes with his own instrument. So these gatherings at the Lam residence in Kendall Park, New Jersey, became everybody's refuge on weekends. This instrument, Jascha Heifetz is known to have said, to a well-wisher who came to the green room backstage after a performance. A well-wisher came in and said, "Oh, Mr. Heifetz, your instrument sounds so good." And Heifetz looked at him. He said, "I don't hear anything." It takes an artist to make a sound from a violin. I want to talk about this particular instrument. This Antonio Stradivarius, made by Antonio and his son Ferdinand, sounded terrible when my father brought it home. My father already had another Strad. I guess he had an opportunity to buy this one cheap because it sounded terrible. So this was a later acquisition, probably around 1986, 87. He had earlier purchased another Strad. It was a beautiful Strad in 1983. And that was the instrument that brought all the big names to this little house in the middle of New Jersey. So when the word got out that my dad, a few years later, bought this Strad, a lot of those folks said, "Oh, did you hear? Wing Lam has a new Strad. Let's go over this weekend and try it out." And they would come to the house and they'd play 3 or 4 notes on it. "Sounds terrible. Terrible. Let me play that other one." And they'd put it down. So this became the matchbox of my dad's extraordinary collection. I didn't know until 20 years after my dad passed away, when people from the Museo del Violino, that's in Cremona, and the Metropolitan Museum in New York, approached me and said, "Did you know your father amassed the most extraordinary single collection of Cremonese violins of any individual collector ever?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." And so the Museo del Violino in Cremona exhibited 7 of my father's 12 major instruments, and the Metropolitan, I believe, exhibited almost all of them, maybe 11 of them. This one was the one nobody really wanted to play. And I always wondered about what it is about this instrument that made my dad interested in it, and what it was that made this instrument sound so bad. It's a Strad. Followed the basic model. I mean, if you look at the top, it's got a higher belly than most of the other Cremonese violins, and a lot of people theorize that the higher belly gives it more room to make sound to resonate. But it's a Strad. It doesn't make sense that it sounds so bad that great players can't even figure out how to make a good sound out of it. Just put it aside. And then one of my friends, who was my son's violin teacher, came over to visit, and I said, "You know, there's this Strad in my father's collection. He's now long gone. Dad died in 1988. This was 1999. And I said, "Can you try it?" And he played it. He said, "Oh, it sounds terrible. It sounds like a matchbox." I said, "Why is that?" And he looked at it, and he said, "Oh, easy. The 2 feet of this bridge have not been shaped. And in particular, for a Strad with a big belly, you really need those legs to be curved to fit the belly. Because if you don't, you think about it, Eva, those 2 flat feet only touch the top of the belly in 2 tiny spots. So why don't we go to a bridge maker in New York and have a new bridge made with 2 feet that fit the top belly of this instrument?" And we did that, and it was an instant change. It was an instant. Suddenly, the violin was singing. Now, the wood had not been vibrated in 20, 30 years at least. People who are watching this video, I hope, will know the importance of matching the position and the shape of the sound post to the top of the violin as well as to the bridge. And the string has to be just right for the player to draw the horsehair over the string. I mean, it's all connected. But I'm quite determined to use my experience in civil engineering and systems engineering, in particular what I know about systems engineering, to be able to promote the concept of instrument, bow, and artist where the artist is the driver of that system. Every component is in play when you see an artist walk up on stage to applause and starts playing. And when an artist enters a chamber music group with other chamber music friends in someone's living room, like my parents' living room, everybody ends up working together. The cellist has to be listening for how the violin is sounding in order for the cellist to know how to sound, to make the music in a quintet or quartet or a trio move an audience. I feel that what my father taught me and what today luthiers are teaching their next generation and players are teaching their next generation, I feel we all have to work together. We can't just be violin makers passing on our trade of how to make a violin. So I am in my retirement years, I'm 69 next month. I'm pretty determined to take my civil and systems engineering experience and apply it to the world of violins, violas, etc., bows, and players. I'm hoping as a community we can make a difference.